Question 1. When direct traceability of an environmental cost to a specific product, process, or activity is not feasible, what principles should guide the allocation of such costs according to ISO 14007-2019, considering the need for a robust and justifiable environmental cost accounting system? Option A. Distribute costs evenly across all products and processes, regardless of their actual environmental performance or resource consumption. Option B. Assign costs based on the seniority of personnel involved in the activity, as a proxy for the complexity of managing environmental aspects. Option C. Utilize cost drivers that reflect the causal relationship between the cost and the activity generating it, ensuring consistency and transparency in the allocation methodology. Option D. Allocate costs based on the total revenue generated by each organizational unit, assuming higher revenue correlates with higher environmental impact. The correct answer is C. Utilize cost drivers that reflect the causal relationship between the cost and the activity generating it, ensuring consistency and transparency in the allocation methodology. Explanation: determining the environmental costs of an organization, as guided by ISO 14007-2019, requires a systematic approach to cost allocation. When direct traceability of an environmental cost to a specific product, process, or activity is not feasible, indirect allocation methods become necessary. ISO 14007-2019 suggests using cost drivers that reflect the causal relationship between the cost and the activity generating it. For example, if a facility generates hazardous waste, the cost of disposal might be allocated based on the volume of waste produced by different production lines, or alternatively, by the number of hazardous material handling incidents associated with each line. The key is to select a driver that logically links the cost to the source. In the absence of a clear, direct causal link, a reasonable and consistent allocation method must be chosen. This often involves identifying the most significant factors influencing the incurrence of the environmental cost. For instance, if the cost of wastewater treatment is incurred due to the discharge from multiple processes, allocating this cost based on the volume of water discharged by each process would be a logical approach. Similarly, if energy consumption is a primary driver for emissions costs, then energy usage per process becomes a relevant cost driver. The standard emphasizes the importance of transparency and consistency in these allocation methods to ensure the reliability of the environmental cost information. The goal is to assign costs in a manner that best reflects the environmental impact and resource consumption of different organizational elements. Question 2. A manufacturing firm, following the guidelines of ISO 14007-2019, is seeking to enhance its environmental cost accounting system. After a period of operation, they observe that their current allocation methods for indirect environmental costs, such as those related to regulatory compliance monitoring and the disposal of non-hazardous waste, are becoming less precise due to changes in their production processes and the introduction of new waste streams. Which of the following strategies best exemplifies the principle of continuous improvement for their environmental cost accounting system in this context? Option A. Implementing a one-time audit of all historical environmental expenditures without establishing a process for ongoing review. Option B. Focusing solely on the financial reporting of environmental liabilities without assessing the operational causes of these costs. Option C. Expanding the scope of environmental cost identification to include only direct costs associated with pollution control equipment. Option D. Systematically reviewing and updating the cost drivers and allocation bases for indirect environmental costs to reflect current operational realities and regulatory obligations. The correct answer is D. Systematically reviewing and updating the cost drivers and allocation bases for indirect environmental costs to reflect current operational realities and regulatory obligations. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 emphasizes the iterative nature of environmental management systems, including the continuous improvement of environmental cost accounting. This involves a feedback loop where the insights gained from identifying, quantifying, and reporting environmental costs inform subsequent planning and operational adjustments. When an organization's environmental cost accounting system is being refined, a key aspect is to ensure that the methods used for identifying and allocating costs remain relevant and accurate in light of evolving operational processes, technological advancements, and changes in regulatory requirements, such as updated emission standards under the Clean Air Act or waste management directives from the Environmental Protection Agency. This refinement process should also consider the feedback from stakeholders and the effectiveness of previous cost reduction initiatives. Therefore, a robust approach to continuous improvement in this domain involves regularly reviewing the scope of cost categories, the precision of allocation methods, and the integration of environmental cost data into broader strategic decision-making. It means moving beyond a static reporting mechanism to a dynamic system that actively supports performance enhancement and resource efficiency. Question 3. A multinational manufacturing conglomerate operating facilities across the European Union and North America is undertaking a comprehensive assessment of its environmental costs in alignment with ISO 14007-2019. Their operations are subject to stringent environmental regulations, including the EU's Industrial Emissions Directive, WIDE, and the US EPA's Clean Air Act. Considering the need for a systematic and comprehensive data collection methodology that captures both direct and indirect environmental expenditures, which of the following approaches would be most effective in ensuring the accuracy and completeness of their environmental cost determination? Option A. Primarily relying on the organization's existing financial accounting system, supplemented by ad hoc requests to departmental managers for estimated environmental expenditures without a standardized collection protocol. Option B. Focusing solely on direct costs associated with pollution control equipment and waste disposal, as these are the most significant and easily quantifiable environmental expenses, and deferring the collection of indirect costs to a later, less prioritized phase. Option C. Utilizing external environmental consulting firms to gather all data, assuming they possess the most accurate and comprehensive understanding of environmental costs, without significant internal validation or integration of company-specific operational data. Option D. Implementing a unified data collection framework that integrates financial accounting data with detailed operational metrics, environmental monitoring reports, and regulatory compliance records, ensuring cross-referencing and validation between different data streams. Correct answer is D. Implementing a unified data collection framework that integrates financial accounting data with detailed operational metrics, environmental monitoring reports, and regulatory compliance records, ensuring cross-referencing and validation between different data streams. Explanation. ISO 14007-2019 emphasizes a structured approach to identifying and collecting data for environmental costs. The standard advocates for a comprehensive methodology that moves beyond simple financial accounting to encompass direct and indirect costs associated with environmental impacts. For a manufacturing firm aiming to comply with directives like the EU's Industrial Emissions Directive, WIDE, and national regulations such as the Clean Air Act in the United States, which mandate pollution control and reporting, a robust data collection strategy is crucial. This strategy should integrate information from various operational and financial systems. Direct costs, such as expenditures on pollution abatement equipment, waste treatment, and environmental permits, are typically easier to track. However, indirect costs, which can include the cost of environmental management systems, employee training on environmental practices, monitoring, auditing, and potential fines or penalties for non-compliance, require more systematic identification and allocation. The standard promotes the use of both internal and external data sources. Internal sources include financial records, operational logs, maintenance reports, and environmental performance data. External sources might involve regulatory agency reports, industry benchmarks, and specialist consultant findings. A tiered approach to data collection, starting with readily available financial data and progressively incorporating more detailed operational and impact-specific information, ensures a more complete and accurate picture of an organization's environmental costs, facilitating informed decision-making and continuous improvement in environmental performance. Question 4. Consider an industrial facility that has experienced a minor, contained chemical leak, which was immediately rectified with no direct regulatory fines or cleanup expenses exceeding a negligible threshold. However, the incident was reported in local media, leading to a noticeable decline in community trust and a slight increase in employee anxiety regarding workplace safety protocols. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14007/2019 for determining environmental costs, which of the following best categorizes the primary cost incurred by the organization in this scenario, necessitating a qualitative assessment? Option A, the direct cost of containment materials and immediate spill response. Option B, the marginal increase in energy consumption during the cleanup operation. Option C, the amortized cost of the facility's pollution control equipment. Option D, reputational damage and diminished stakeholder confidence. The correct answer is D, reputational damage and diminished stakeholder confidence. Explanation: ISO 14007/2019 emphasizes the importance of identifying and evaluating environmental costs. While quantitative measures are preferred for their precision and comparability, qualitative assessments are crucial when precise monetary values are difficult or impossible to ascertain. Qualitative environmental costs are those that are not easily expressed in financial terms, but still represent a significant burden or impact on the organization or environment. These can include reputational damage, loss of biodiversity, decreased employee morale due to environmental incidents, or the social impact of pollution. The standard suggests that these qualitative aspects should still be documented and considered in the overall environmental cost determination process, often through descriptive narratives, risk assessments, or impact matrices. For instance, a significant oil spill, while having quantifiable cleanup costs, also incurs immeasurable qualitative costs like long-term damage to marine ecosystems and a severe blow to the company's public image, which are not directly captured by a balance sheet, but are vital for a holistic understanding of environmental impact and associated costs. The challenge lies in integrating these less tangible costs into decision-making processes, ensuring they are not overlooked in favor of easily quantifiable financial figures. The standard encourages a balanced approach, leveraging quantitative data where available and supplementing it with robust qualitative analysis to provide a comprehensive view of an organization's environmental financial exposure and performance. Question 5. When an industrial manufacturing firm, Ethelred Industries, is evaluating its environmental cost management strategies in alignment with ISO 14007/2019, which of the following cost categories most accurately reflects the potential financial implications of a historical, unaddressed soil contamination incident at a former plant location, considering both immediate remediation efforts and potential long-term legal liabilities under regulations like CERCLA Superfund? Option A, relational environmental costs. Option B, direct environmental costs. Option C, contingent environmental costs. Option D, indirect environmental costs. The correct answer is C, contingent environmental costs. Explanation: ISO 14007/2019 emphasizes the proactive identification and management of environmental costs. This involves classifying costs into direct, indirect, contingent, and relational categories. Direct environmental costs are those directly attributable to environmental activities, such as waste treatment or pollution control equipment. Indirect environmental costs are those that are not directly linked to a specific environmental activity, but are still a consequence of environmental management, such as increased administrative overhead for environmental compliance or employee training. Contingent environmental costs are potential future costs that may arise from past or present activities, like fines for noncompliance with regulations such as the Clean Water Act, or remediation costs for historical contamination. Relational environmental costs are those associated with the organization's relationships with stakeholders, such as the cost of community engagement programs or the impact on brand reputation due to environmental incidents. A key strategy for effective environmental cost management is to integrate these cost considerations into decision-making processes, thereby fostering a culture of environmental responsibility and potentially identifying opportunities for cost savings through improved environmental performance. For instance, investing in cleaner production technologies might incur higher initial direct costs, but could lead to significant reductions in indirect waste disposal costs and contingent liabilities for future pollution. The goal is to move beyond mere compliance to a strategic approach that leverages environmental cost information for competitive advantage and sustainability. Question 6. Within the context of implementing ISO 14007/2019 guidelines for determining environmental costs, how does the check phase of the Plan-Do-Check-Act cycle specifically contribute to the refinement of an organization's environmental cost accounting and management processes? Option A. By developing and implementing new operational procedures and training programs aimed at reducing environmental expenditures. Option B. By establishing new environmental objectives and targets for cost reduction and identifying potential new environmental impacts to be monitored. Option C. By conducting external audits and seeking third-party certification for the environmental cost accounting framework. Option D. By verifying the accuracy of collected environmental cost data, assessing the effectiveness of implemented cost reduction measures, and reviewing the appropriateness of cost allocation methodologies against established performance criteria. The correct answer is D. By verifying the accuracy of collected environmental cost data, assessing the effectiveness of implemented cost reduction measures, and reviewing the appropriateness of cost allocation methodologies against established performance criteria. Explanation. ISO 14007/2019 emphasizes the integration of environmental cost determination into an organization's environmental management system, EMS, often structured around the Plan-Do-Check-Act (PDCA) cycle. During the check phase of this cycle, an organization evaluates its environmental performance against established objectives and targets. This involves monitoring key performance indicators, conducting internal audits, and reviewing the effectiveness of implemented environmental programs. For environmental cost determination, this phase would involve assessing whether the identified environmental costs are accurately captured, whether the implemented cost reduction initiatives are yielding the expected financial benefits, and if the methodologies for cost allocation are still appropriate and effective. For instance, if an organization implemented a new waste reduction program during the do phase, the check phase would involve verifying the actual reduction in waste disposal costs and comparing it to the projected savings. It also involves ensuring that the financial data collected accurately reflects the environmental impacts and management efforts. This critical review ensures that the environmental cost information is reliable for decision-making and for driving continuous improvement in subsequent PDCA cycles. The check phase is crucial for validating the data and processes used for environmental cost accounting, ensuring that the organization's understanding of its environmental financial performance is accurate and actionable, thereby supporting better strategic environmental management and compliance with evolving regulations. Question 7. When conducting an audit of an organization's environmental cost determination process as per ISO 14007/2019, what is the most critical audit procedure to ensure the comprehensive identification of all relevant environmental expenditures, particularly those that are indirect or difficult to quantify? Option A. Interviewing key personnel in the finance and operations departments to gather anecdotal evidence of environmental costs without requiring supporting documentation. Option B. Tracing financial transactions from source documents to the final environmental cost reports, cross-referencing with internal environmental management system records and relevant regulatory compliance documentation. Option C. Reviewing the organization's environmental policy and objectives to infer potential cost categories that may not be explicitly documented in financial statements. Option D. Analyzing industry benchmarks for environmental spending to validate the reported figures, assuming that deviations indicate potential misidentification of costs. The correct answer is B. Tracing financial transactions from source documents to the final environmental cost reports, cross-referencing with internal environmental management system records and relevant regulatory compliance documentation. Explanation. ISO 14007/2019 provides guidelines for determining environmental costs. When auditing an organization's environmental cost determination process, auditors need to verify the completeness and accuracy of the identified costs. This involves examining the methodology used to capture both direct and indirect environmental expenditures. Direct costs are those clearly attributable to environmental activities, such as waste disposal fees or pollution control equipment maintenance. Indirect costs are more complex and may include the cost of managing environmental permits, training staff on environmental procedures, or the financial impact of environmental incidents. A crucial audit technique is to trace the flow of financial data from source documents to the reported environmental costs. This includes reviewing purchase orders for environmental supplies, invoices for waste management services, and internal cost allocation records. Auditors should also assess the organization's internal controls related to environmental cost accounting to ensure that costs are consistently identified, measured, and reported in accordance with the chosen methodology. Furthermore, the audit should consider whether the organization has adequately incorporated contingent environmental liabilities and the costs associated with potential future environmental remediation into its assessment, as recommended by the standard. The auditor must also confirm that the organization's approach aligns with relevant national or regional environmental regulations that might mandate specific cost tracking or reporting mechanisms. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the reported environmental costs provide a true and fair representation of the organization's environmental financial performance. Question 8. An industrial facility is undertaking a comprehensive review of its environmental expenditures in alignment with ISO 14007-2019 guidelines. This review aims to capture all financial outlays directly and indirectly linked to environmental impacts and management activities. Considering the standard's emphasis on a holistic approach, which of the following categories of costs most accurately reflects the intended broad scope of environmental cost determination as outlined in ISO 14007-2019, encompassing both proactive and reactive measures and their associated financial implications? Option A. Costs associated with regulatory compliance, pollution prevention initiatives, waste management, resource efficiency improvements, and the financial implications of environmental liabilities. Option B. Expenses incurred solely for the disposal of hazardous waste and the remediation of accidental spills. Option C. Outlays related to marketing environmental products and services and the administrative overhead of the environmental department. Option D. Primarily costs related to the acquisition of new environmental technologies and the training of personnel on their operation. Correct answer is A. Costs associated with regulatory compliance, pollution prevention initiatives, waste management, resource efficiency improvements, and the financial implications of environmental liabilities. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 is a standard that provides guidelines for organizations to determine their environmental costs. It aims to help entities understand the financial implications of their environmental performance, both direct and indirect, and to identify opportunities for improvement. The scope of the standard encompasses all types of environmental costs, including those associated with preventing pollution, managing waste, remediation of contaminated sites, and the use of natural resources. It also considers costs related to environmental compliance with regulations such as the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive or national legislation like the Clean Air Act in the United States, which mandates specific emission limits and control technologies. The standard emphasizes a life cycle perspective, encouraging organizations to consider costs from the design phase through to decommissioning. It is designed to be applicable to any organization, regardless of its size, type, or location, and to support the integration of environmental cost information into strategic decision-making and financial reporting. The purpose is not to prescribe a specific accounting method, but to offer a framework for identifying, quantifying, and reporting environmental costs, thereby enhancing transparency and facilitating better environmental management. Question 9. Consider an industrial facility that has been found liable for releasing a hazardous substance into a local river, causing significant ecological disruption and impacting downstream water quality. Under the principles of ISO 14007-2019 for determining environmental costs, which of the following categories most directly represents the financial outlay associated with the physical harm caused by this release, as stipulated by remediation orders and legal settlements? Option A. Expenditures for the physical removal of contaminated sediment and water and the replanting of affected riparian vegetation. Option B. Fines and penalties imposed by environmental regulatory agencies for noncompliance with discharge permits. Option C. Investments in new pollution control technologies to prevent future similar incidents. Option D. Costs incurred for legal counsel and expert witness testimony during the litigation process. The correct answer is A. Expenditures for the physical removal of contaminated sediment and water and the replanting of affected riparian vegetation. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 provides a framework for identifying, quantifying, and reporting environmental costs. When considering liability for environmental damage, particularly in the context of remediation and legal obligations, the classification of these costs is crucial. Direct costs of environmental damage are those that arise from the actual physical harm caused by an organization's activities. These include expenses directly related to the cleanup of pollution, restoration of damaged ecosystems, and compensation for third-party damages. Indirect costs, while also important for a comprehensive environmental cost accounting, do not directly represent the financial impact of the physical damage itself, but rather the organizational responses or consequences. For instance, fines and penalties are a consequence of noncompliance with environmental regulations, which may be triggered by damage, but they are not the cost of the damage itself. Similarly, legal defense costs are associated with managing the liability arising from damage, not the damage's direct financial impact. Voluntary remediation efforts, if undertaken proactively before legal mandates, might be considered a form of environmental cost accounting. But the question specifically asks about costs arising from liability for damage, implying a response to a confirmed incident. Therefore, the direct costs of cleaning up a contaminated water source due to a chemical spill are the most accurate representation of the financial impact of the environmental damage itself, as they are the expenditures directly incurred to rectify the harm. Question 10. A manufacturing firm, Viridian Dynamics, is undergoing an environmental cost assessment aligned with ISO 14007-2019. Their analysis of past operations reveals potential liabilities related to historical waste disposal practices at a former site, which might necessitate future soil and groundwater remediation efforts under evolving environmental regulations. Furthermore, their current production processes, while compliant with existing standards, could lead to unforeseen expenditures if stricter air emission limits are enacted in the coming decade. Which category of environmental costs, as defined within the scope of ISO 14007-2019, best encompasses these potential future financial obligations? Option A. Societal environmental costs. Option B. Contingent environmental costs. Option C. Direct environmental costs. Option D. Indirect environmental costs. The correct answer is B. Contingent environmental costs. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 provides a framework for identifying, quantifying, and managing environmental costs. When applying life cycle assessment (LCA) to determine these costs, it is crucial to distinguish between different categories of environmental costs. Direct environmental costs are those explicitly incurred by an organization to manage or mitigate its environmental impacts, such as pollution control equipment operation or waste disposal fees. Indirect environmental costs are those that are not directly attributable to a specific environmental activity, but are nonetheless influenced by environmental performance. For example, increased insurance premiums due to a poor environmental record, or the cost of repairing damage caused by an environmental incident. Contingent environmental costs are potential future costs arising from past or present activities, often linked to regulatory changes or unforeseen events, such as potential remediation costs for historical contamination or fines for non-compliance with emerging environmental legislation. Finally, societal environmental costs, while not typically borne directly by the organization, represent the broader impacts on society and the environment that are not captured by market prices, such as the loss of biodiversity or public health impacts from pollution. The question asks to identify the category of environmental cost that arises from potential future liabilities stemming from current or past organizational actions, which is the definition of contingent environmental costs. Question 11. When evaluating an organization's environmental expenditures according to ISO 14007-2019, which of the following categories most accurately represents costs that are difficult to directly link to a specific environmental aspect or impact? often stemming from broader organizational decisions or general operational inefficiencies with environmental implications. Option A. Indirect environmental costs. Option B. Operational environmental expenditures. Option C. Contingent environmental liabilities. Option D. Regulatory compliance overheads. Correct answer is A. Indirect environmental costs. Explanation. ISO 14007, 2019 distinguishes between direct and indirect environmental costs. Direct environmental costs are those that can be directly traced to an environmental aspect or impact, such as the cost of waste disposal, pollution control equipment operation, or environmental fines. Indirect environmental costs, on the other hand, are more challenging to attribute directly and often arise from broader organizational activities or decisions that have environmental consequences. These can include costs associated with potential future liabilities, reputational damage, or the loss of market share due to poor environmental performance. The standard emphasizes the importance of identifying and quantifying both types of costs to gain a comprehensive understanding of an organization's environmental financial footprint. This comprehensive view supports better decision-making, investment in pollution prevention, and the integration of environmental considerations into business strategy. For instance, a company might incur direct costs for treating wastewater discharge, but indirect costs could manifest as increased insurance premiums due to a history of environmental noncompliance or the loss of a key customer who prioritizes sustainability. Therefore, understanding the nature of these cost categories is fundamental to effectively applying the guidelines of ISO 14007. Question 12. A chemical processing plant, Viridian Synthetics, is undergoing an environmental cost assessment as per ISO 14007, 2019. A significant local environmental advocacy group has raised concerns about the long-term ecological impact of past waste disposal practices, specifically mentioning potential soil remediation and the loss of biodiversity in a nearby wetland. How should Viridian Synthetics best incorporate these specific stakeholder concerns into its environmental cost determination process to ensure a comprehensive and compliant assessment? Option A. Discount the concerns as speculative and focus solely on quantifiable, direct costs associated with current compliance regulations and immediate operational expenditures. Option B. Acknowledge the concerns verbally during a public meeting, but defer any detailed cost estimation until a formal environmental audit is completed, focusing primarily on current operational costs. Option C. Systematically gather and analyze the advocacy group's documented concerns, estimating potential future costs for soil remediation and ecosystem restoration, and considering the financial implications of potential regulatory actions or reputational damage arising from these issues. Option D. Commission a broad, general environmental impact study without specifically addressing the detailed concerns raised by the advocacy group, treating all potential future costs as highly uncertain and therefore unquantifiable. Correct answer is C. Systematically gather and analyze the advocacy group's documented concerns, estimating potential future costs for soil remediation and ecosystem restoration, and considering the financial implications of potential regulatory actions or reputational damage arising from these issues. Explanation. ISO 14007, 2019 provides a framework for organizations to identify, measure, and manage environmental costs. A key aspect of this standard is the engagement with stakeholders to understand their perspectives and concerns regarding the organization's environmental performance and associated costs. Stakeholder concerns, when properly integrated into the environmental cost determination process, can reveal hidden or indirect costs that might otherwise be overlooked. For instance, a local community group expressing concern about potential water contamination from a manufacturing facility might highlight the need to account for future remediation costs or reputational damage, which are often difficult to quantify but are nonetheless real environmental costs. Similarly, investors might demand disclosure of climate-related financial risks, prompting the organization to estimate the costs associated with carbon emissions or the transition to a low-carbon economy. These concerns, when systematically collected and analyzed, inform the scope and depth of the environmental cost assessment, ensuring it reflects a broader understanding of environmental impacts and their financial implications. aligning with the principles of transparency and accountability emphasized in environmental management standards. This process helps in identifying costs that are not always obvious through purely internal operational reviews. Question 13. When assessing the environmental costs associated with the production of specialty chemicals, as guided by ISO 14007-2019, which analytical framework most comprehensively captures the embedded costs stemming from upstream resource extraction, energy generation for intermediate processing, and downstream waste management, including potential regulatory compliance expenses related to air emissions. Option A direct cost accounting method focused solely on expenses incurred within the immediate chemical manufacturing facility. Option B, a comparative cost analysis comparing the environmental performance of different chemical synthesis routes without quantifying the full economic implications of each stage. Option C, an input-output analysis that traces costs through the entire value chain, including indirect and upstream impacts. Option D, a life cycle cost assessment that primarily quantifies the operational costs of the chemical plant itself, with limited consideration for supply chain externalities. Correct answer is C, an input-output analysis that traces costs through the entire value chain, including indirect and upstream impacts. Explanation: the core principle of input-output analysis in the context of ISO 14007-2019 involves tracing the environmental costs associated with the entire life cycle of a product or service, from raw material extraction through production, use, and disposal. This method acknowledges that environmental impacts and their associated costs are not confined to a single stage, but are embedded throughout the value chain. When considering the environmental costs of a specific industrial process, such as the production of synthetic polymers, an input-output analysis would examine the costs incurred not only in the direct manufacturing steps, but also in the upstream supply chain, e.g., extraction and processing of petrochemical feedstocks, energy generation for these processes, and downstream activities, e.g., transportation of finished products, waste management of polymer byproducts or end-of-life products. This comprehensive view allows for more accurate determination of the total environmental burden and associated financial implications. For instance, the cost of energy used in polymer synthesis, which might be powered by fossil fuels, would include not only the direct electricity bill, but also the upstream costs of fuel extraction, refining, and transmission, as well as potential costs related to greenhouse gas emissions if regulated under a carbon pricing mechanism, such as those evolving under European Union directives. Similarly, the cost of waste disposal for polymer manufacturing scrap would extend to the environmental costs of landfilling or incineration, including potential leachate management or air pollution control measures. The effectiveness of this approach lies in its systemic perspective, enabling organizations to identify hidden environmental costs and opportunities for improvement across their entire operational and supply chain network, aligning with the proactive environmental management principles advocated by ISO 14007. Question 14. An industrial facility in the chemical manufacturing sector is assessing its environmental expenditures following the introduction of a novel synthesis pathway that utilizes a previously unregistered solvent. This solvent, while improving product yield, has a moderate potential for groundwater contamination if spills occur, and its disposal requires specialized incineration. The company has also invested in enhanced employee training for handling this solvent, and has allocated resources for regular air quality monitoring around the facility perimeter to ensure compliance with the Clean Air Act. Additionally, they are engaging with a local environmental advocacy group to proactively address potential community concerns regarding the solvent's life cycle. Which of the following classifications accurately reflects the primary nature of these associated environmental costs according to ISO 14007-2019? Option A. Costs for specialized incineration of the solvent and potential groundwater remediation are direct environmental costs, while employee training and air quality monitoring are indirect environmental costs, and community engagement is a relational environmental cost. Option B. Direct environmental costs encompass only the expenses directly linked to pollution prevention, while all other expenditures are categorized as indirect environmental costs. Option C. Specialized incineration and potential groundwater remediation are relational environmental costs, Employee training is a direct environmental cost, and air quality monitoring is a contingent environmental cost. Option D. All costs related to the new solvent, including training, monitoring, disposal, and community engagement, are considered contingent environmental costs due to the inherent uncertainties. Correct answer is A. Costs for specialized incineration of the solvent and potential groundwater remediation are direct environmental costs, while employee training and air quality monitoring are indirect environmental costs, and community engagement is a relational environmental cost. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 provides a framework for identifying, collecting, analyzing, and reporting environmental costs. It categorizes these costs into direct, indirect, contingent, and relational costs. Direct environmental costs are those directly attributable to environmental activities or impacts, such as waste treatment or pollution control equipment. Indirect environmental costs are those that are not directly tied to specific environmental actions, but are incurred due to environmental management systems or regulatory compliance, like environmental training or permit fees. Contingent environmental costs are potential costs arising from future environmental events, such as remediation liabilities or fines, for noncompliance with regulations like the Clean Water Act. Relational environmental costs are associated with the organization's relationships with stakeholders regarding environmental performance, including public relations efforts or community engagement programs. When an organization implements a new process that generates hazardous byproducts, the costs associated with managing and disposing of these byproducts, including regulatory reporting and specialized treatment, are considered direct environmental costs. Furthermore, if the process leads to potential soil contamination, the costs associated with monitoring and the possibility of future cleanup under regulations like CERCLA, Superfund, represent contingent environmental costs. Development and implementation of new internal procedures to track these hazardous byproducts and their disposal, even if not directly linked to a specific emission or discharge, fall under indirect environmental costs. The expense of engaging with the local community to address concerns about the new process's potential environmental impact would be classified as a relational environmental cost. Therefore, a comprehensive environmental cost accounting system, as guided by ISO 14007, would capture all these distinct categories of expenditure to provide a holistic view of the organization's environmental financial commitments. Question 15. When an organization is undertaking an environmental cost determination process aligned with ISO 14007-2019, what is the primary strategic benefit of proactively engaging with a diverse range of external stakeholders, such as community representatives and environmental advocacy groups, beyond merely fulfilling compliance requirements? Option A. To generate a list of potential environmental fines and penalties that the organization might face under various national and international regulations. Option B. To identify opportunities for marketing and public relations campaigns that highlight the organization's environmental commitments and achievements. Option C. To gather data for annual sustainability reports, ensuring that all reported environmental expenditures are validated by external parties. Option D. To gain a more comprehensive understanding of potential hidden or indirect environmental costs and liabilities that internal assessments might overlook. The correct answer is D. To gain a more comprehensive understanding of potential hidden or indirect environmental costs and liabilities that internal assessments might overlook. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 emphasizes the importance of stakeholder engagement in identifying and understanding environmental costs. Clause 6. 2. Stakeholder identification and engagement highlights that effective communication with stakeholders provides valuable insights into the organization's environmental impacts and associated costs, which might not be apparent through internal analysis alone. Stakeholders can include regulatory bodies, local communities, non-governmental organizations, NGO, employees, and customers. Their perspectives can reveal hidden costs related to reputational damage, potential fines under environmental legislation such as the Clean Water Act or the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, in the United States, or unforeseen remediation expenses. Proactive and transparent communication fosters trust and collaboration, leading to a more comprehensive and accurate determination of environmental costs. This engagement helps in identifying both direct and indirect costs, including those related to compliance, pollution prevention, and environmental performance improvement. Without robust stakeholder input, an organization risks overlooking critical aspects of its environmental footprint and the true financial implications. Therefore, a structured approach to engaging stakeholders, including clear communication channels and feedback mechanisms, is integral to the successful application of ISO 14007-2019 for a holistic environmental cost assessment. Question 16. A multinational manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is implementing ISO 14007-2019 to better understand its environmental costs. They have identified significant indirect environmental costs associated with their corporate-wide waste management program, which includes hazardous waste disposal, recycling initiatives, and regulatory compliance reporting. The firm operates multiple distinct product lines, each with varying waste generation profiles and recycling participation rates. To accurately attribute the costs of this waste management program to each product line, which allocation method would most effectively align with the principles of ISO 14007-2019 for determining environmental costs? Option A. Direct tracing of all waste management program costs to the product line with the highest absolute waste generation. Option B. Proportional allocation based on the total number of employees working on each product line. Option C. Activity-based costing, allocating costs based on waste generation volume and recycling participation rates for each product line. Option D. Simple allocation based on the total revenue generated by each product line. The correct answer is C. Activity-based costing, allocating costs based on waste generation volume and recycling participation rates for each product line. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 provides guidance on determining the environmental costs of an organization. When allocating these costs to specific products, services, or activities, a key consideration is the cause and effect relationship. Direct costs, such as the purchase of pollution control equipment for a specific manufacturing line, can be directly traced. However, many environmental costs are indirect, arising from shared resources or overarching management systems. For these indirect costs, activity-based costing, ABC, is often the most appropriate method. ABC identifies cost drivers, the factors that cause costs to occur, and allocates costs based on the consumption of these drivers by different products, services, or activities. For instance, the cost of a corporate environmental management system might be allocated based on factors like the number of environmental permits managed per product line, the volume of waste generated by an activity, or the energy consumed by a specific process. This approach provides a more accurate reflection of how each entity contributes to and benefits from environmental management efforts, aligning with the principles of identifying and managing environmental costs effectively. Other methods like simple allocation based on revenue or volume might distort the true cost attribution, failing to capture the nuanced relationships between activities and their environmental impacts. Question 17. A manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, is implementing a new strategy focused on enhancing its resource efficiency in line with ISO 14007-2019 guidelines. They have successfully reduced their consumption of virgin materials by 15% and decreased their energy usage by 10% through process optimization and the adoption of more efficient equipment. Concurrently, these changes have led to a 20% reduction in hazardous waste generation. Considering the framework provided by ISO 14007-2019 for determining environmental costs, how would the primary environmental cost implications of Veridian Dynamics resource efficiency improvements be characterized? Option A. A shift in environmental costs from direct operational expenses to indirect liabilities related to employee training and process redesign. Option B. A reduction in direct costs for raw material procurement and energy consumption, alongside decreased expenses for waste treatment and disposal. Option C. Primarily a mitigation of potential future regulatory penalties, with no immediate quantifiable cost savings. Option D. An increase in capital expenditure for new equipment, offset by a marginal decrease in operational overheads. The correct answer is B. a reduction in direct costs for raw material procurement and energy consumption, alongside decreased expenses for waste treatment and disposal. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 14007/2019 regarding environmental costs and resource efficiency is the identification and quantification of costs associated with the use and management of resources. When an organization aims to improve resource efficiency, it directly impacts its environmental costs by reducing the consumption of raw materials, energy, and water. These reductions translate into lower direct costs for procurement and operational inputs. Furthermore, improved resource efficiency often leads to a decrease in waste generation, which in turn lowers costs associated with waste treatment, disposal, and potential regulatory fines. The standard emphasizes linking these cost reductions to strategic decision-making and performance improvement. Therefore, the most accurate representation of the environmental cost impact of enhanced resource efficiency, as per ISO 14007/2019, is the reduction in both direct resource input costs and indirect waste management expenses, reflecting a more sustainable and cost-effective operational model. This aligns with the standard's objective of integrating environmental considerations into financial management and decision-making processes. Question 18. During an audit of a multinational manufacturing firm, the internal environmental team is tasked with refining their environmental cost accounting practices in alignment with ISO 14007/2019. They are reviewing expenditures related to a new policy aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from their logistics operations, which involves investing in more fuel-efficient vehicles and implementing route optimization software. Considering the guidelines for determining environmental costs, which of the following best represents a cost category that encompasses these specific investments and associated operational adjustments? Option A: costs of environmental management and pollution prevention. Option B: costs of environmental compliance and reporting. Option C: costs of environmental remediation and restoration. Option D: costs of environmental damage and liability. The correct answer is A: costs of environmental management and pollution prevention. Explanation: ISO 14007/2019 provides a framework for identifying, quantifying, and reporting environmental costs. Environmental costs are defined as the direct and indirect costs incurred by an organization as a result of its environmental aspects and impacts. These costs can arise from various activities, including pollution prevention, waste management, compliance with regulations such as the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive (WIDE) or National Environmental Protection Acts, remediation of contaminated sites, and the development of environmentally sound products and processes. The standard categorizes these costs to facilitate a comprehensive understanding and management. These categories include costs of environmental management systems, costs of pollution prevention and control, costs of environmental remediation, and costs of environmental damage. For instance, a company investing in advanced wastewater treatment technology to comply with stricter discharge limits imposed by local environmental authorities is incurring a cost related to environmental management and pollution control. Similarly, the expense of restoring land after an accidental spill of hazardous materials, as mandated by environmental liability laws, falls under remediation costs. The overarching principle is to capture all expenditures, both internal and external, that are directly or indirectly linked to managing or mitigating environmental performance. Question 19. When an organization is establishing its environmental cost determination process in alignment with ISO 14007/2019, what is the most critical component of its training and capacity building strategy to ensure sustained and accurate implementation of the standard? Option A: outsourcing the entire environmental cost determination function to external consultants without any internal knowledge transfer or development. Option B: focusing solely on the financial accounting aspects of environmental costs, neglecting the technical identification and measurement of environmental impacts. Option C: conducting a one-time, broad-based workshop on general environmental management principles for all employees, regardless of their role in the cost determination process. Option D: developing tailored training modules that cover the organization's specific environmental aspects, relevant legal obligations, and the practical application of cost identification and allocation methodologies. The correct answer is D. Developing tailored training modules that cover the organization's specific environmental aspects, relevant legal obligations, and the practical application of cost identification and allocation methodologies. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes the importance of developing internal capacity for environmental cost determination. This involves ensuring that personnel possess the necessary knowledge and skills to identify, quantify, and report environmental costs effectively. Training programs should be tailored to the specific context of the organization, addressing the types of environmental impacts and associated costs relevant to its operations. This includes understanding the principles of environmental accounting, relevant legislation and regulatory frameworks, such as waste management regulations or emission standards that can lead to direct or indirect costs, and the methodologies for cost allocation and integration into financial reporting. Capacity building also extends to fostering a culture of environmental awareness and responsibility throughout the organization, enabling employees at various levels to contribute to the environmental cost determination process. A comprehensive approach to training and capacity building ensures that the organization can consistently and accurately implement the guidelines of ISO 14007, 2019, leading to better informed decision-making regarding environmental performance and resource management. This proactive development of internal expertise is crucial for the long-term success of an environmental management system. Question 20. During an environmental cost audit for a manufacturing firm operating under the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive, what is the most critical aspect to verify regarding the organization's environmental cost accounting system to ensure alignment with ISO 14007, 2019 principles? Option A. The market share of the organization's environmentally friendly products compared to its competitors. Option B. The number of environmental training sessions conducted for employees involved in environmental cost data collection. Option C. The extent to which the environmental cost data is integrated into the organization's overall financial statements for external reporting purposes. Option D. The accuracy and completeness of the identification and allocation of all environmental costs, including those arising from regulatory compliance and voluntary initiatives. The correct answer is D. The accuracy and completeness of the identification and allocation of all environmental costs, including those arising from regulatory compliance and voluntary initiatives. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 provides a framework for identifying, quantifying, and managing environmental costs. When conducting an environmental cost audit, the primary objective is to ensure that the organization's environmental cost accounting system accurately reflects the true costs associated with its environmental aspects and impacts, as well as its environmental management system. This involves scrutinizing the methods used for cost identification, allocation, and reporting to ensure they align with the standard's principles and the organization's specific context. The audit should verify that all relevant environmental costs, both direct and indirect, tangible and intangible, are captured. This includes costs arising from regulatory compliance, such as fines or remediation expenses mandated by laws like the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act (CERCLA), or EU directives on waste management. It also encompasses costs related to pollution prevention, waste reduction initiatives, energy efficiency improvements, and the management of environmental liabilities. The audit process itself is a critical component of an effective environmental management system, providing assurance that the organization's financial reporting accurately represents its environmental performance and associated expenditures, thereby supporting informed decision-making and continuous improvement. The focus is on the integrity and completeness of the cost data and the underlying processes that generate it. Question 21. An industrial facility is undertaking a comprehensive environmental cost assessment aligned with ISO 14007, 2019. To accurately capture the spectrum of environmental expenditures, including those stemming from regulatory noncompliance and proactive mitigation efforts, which data collection strategy would most effectively integrate diverse internal knowledge and operational realities? Option A. A review of all outgoing invoices related to environmental services and a single focus group session with the senior management team. Option B. an external consultant's assessment based solely on the company's financial statements and general environmental legislation. Option C, targeted interviews with departmental heads and key operational staff, supplemented by an analysis of internal procurement records and maintenance logs for environmental equipment. Option D, a consolidated survey administered to all personnel, coupled with a review of publicly available environmental impact reports and industry best practice benchmarks. Correct answer is D, a consolidated survey administered to all personnel, coupled with a review of publicly available environmental impact reports and industry best practice benchmarks. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes a structured approach to identifying and categorizing environmental costs. When determining environmental costs, particularly those that are indirect or intangible, the standard advocates for a systematic data collection process. This involves engaging with various internal stakeholders who possess direct knowledge of operational activities and their associated environmental impacts. For instance, operational managers are crucial for understanding direct resource consumption and waste generation, while finance departments can provide data on expenditures related to environmental compliance, permits, and remediation. Furthermore, technical personnel in areas like engineering or environmental health and safety are vital for assessing the costs associated with pollution control technologies, monitoring, and the potential liabilities arising from non-compliance with regulations such as the EU's Industrial Emissions Directive or National Air Quality Standards. The standard suggests a multifaceted approach, often involving interviews, surveys, and the review of existing financial and operational records. The key is to capture both direct financial outlays and the less quantifiable costs, such as potential fines, reputational damage, or the cost of managing unforeseen environmental events, by thoroughly documenting the information flow from the source of the activity to its financial or operational consequence. Question 22. When assessing an organization's environmental costs in accordance with ISO 14007, 2019, which of the following categories of costs is most directly influenced by the proactive incorporation of anticipated changes in environmental legislation, such as stricter emissions limits or new chemical substance restrictions, beyond immediate compliance obligations? Option A, expenses for ongoing operational compliance activities, such as routine emissions monitoring and reporting to current regulatory bodies. Option B, fines and penalties incurred due to past or present noncompliance with existing environmental laws and regulations. Option C, costs for purchasing personal protective equipment for employees to ensure safety in handling hazardous materials, as stipulated by current workplace safety laws. Option D, costs associated with the design and implementation of new process technologies to meet projected future regulatory requirements for reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Correct answer is D, costs associated with the design and implementation of new process technologies to meet projected future regulatory requirements for reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes the importance of considering external environmental laws and regulations when determining an organization's environmental costs. These legal frameworks often impose direct financial obligations, such as fines for noncompliance, permit fees, and costs associated with remediation or pollution control equipment, mandated by legislation. For instance, a company operating in a region with strict air emission standards, like those under the Clean Air Act in the United States or the Industrial Emissions Directive in the European Union, will incur costs to meet these requirements. These costs can include purchasing abatement technology, ongoing monitoring and reporting, and potential penalties if emissions exceed legal limits. Furthermore, evolving regulations, such as those related to chemical usage, e.g., REACH in the EU, or waste management, e.g., ARCRA in the US, can necessitate changes in processes or materials, leading to new or increased environmental costs. Identifying and quantifying these costs is crucial for a comprehensive understanding of an organization's environmental financial footprint, as mandated by the standard, to enable informed decision-making and strategic environmental management. The core principle is that adherence to legal obligations and the anticipation of future regulatory changes are integral components of an organization's environmental cost structure. Question 23. When an organization is preparing to communicate its determined environmental costs, as guided by ISO 14007, 2019, to a diverse range of stakeholders including investors, local community representatives, and national regulatory agencies, which communication strategy would best facilitate understanding and support for the organization's environmental management efforts? Option A. Developing a single, comprehensive report detailing all identified environmental costs using highly technical accounting and environmental science terminology. Option B. Focusing solely on communicating the direct, easily quantifiable environmental costs, omitting any indirect or contingent costs to simplify the message. Option C. Prioritizing the dissemination of raw, unanalyzed environmental cost data through public online repositories to ensure maximum transparency. Option D. Creating tailored communication packages for each stakeholder group, translating environmental cost data into formats and language relevant to their specific interests and decision-making processes. The correct answer is A. Developing a single, comprehensive report detailing all identified environmental costs using highly technical accounting and environmental science terminology. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes the importance of communicating environmental cost information to various stakeholders to foster transparency and informed decision-making. When considering the communication of these costs, especially in the context of potential regulatory changes or evolving societal expectations, the most effective approach is to tailor the information to the specific needs and understanding of each stakeholder group. This involves translating complex environmental cost data into formats that are readily comprehensible and relevant to their interests. For instance, investors might be interested in the financial implications of environmental liabilities and opportunities, while local communities might focus on the costs associated with pollution remediation or community engagement programs. Regulatory bodies would require information that demonstrates compliance and the effectiveness of environmental management systems. Therefore, a strategic approach that involves segmenting stakeholders, understanding their information requirements, and presenting the environmental cost data in an accessible and relevant manner, often through summarized reports, case studies, or targeted presentations, is paramount. This ensures that the information serves its intended purpose of influencing behavior, supporting investment decisions, or demonstrating accountability, rather than being lost in technical jargon or irrelevant details. The goal is to facilitate a shared understanding of the organization's environmental performance and its associated costs. Question 24. A manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, has been diligently applying ISO 14007, 2019 principles to track its environmental expenditures. After several years of operation, management observes that while the system captures direct costs like waste disposal and energy consumption, it struggles to accurately reflect the financial implications of indirect environmental impacts, such as the cost of potential future regulatory noncompliance or the financial benefits of enhanced corporate reputation due to proactive environmental stewardship. Which of the following actions would most effectively contribute to the continuous improvement of Veridian Dynamics' environmental cost accounting system in alignment with ISO 14007, 2019? Option A. Focusing solely on reducing the most significant direct environmental costs identified in the current system, as per the Pareto principle. Option B. Engaging external consultants to conduct a one-time audit of the environmental cost accounting system without subsequent integration into operational decision-making. Option C. Implementing a new software system that automates the calculation of all identified environmental costs, regardless of their direct measurability. Option D. Broadening the scope of cost identification to include contingent environmental liabilities and the financial valuation of environmental reputation enhancements. The correct answer is D. Broadening the scope of cost identification to include contingent environmental liabilities and the financial valuation of environmental reputation enhancements. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes a structured approach to identifying, measuring, and reporting environmental costs to support continuous improvement. The standard suggests that to effectively enhance an environmental cost accounting system, an organization should regularly review its cost categories, data collection methods, and reporting formats. This review should be informed by feedback from internal stakeholders, changes in environmental regulations, such as those impacting waste disposal fees or emissions trading schemes, and evolving business operations. A key aspect of continuous improvement is the integration of environmental cost information into strategic decision-making processes, such as investment appraisal for cleaner technologies or process optimization. This integration allows for a more comprehensive understanding of the financial implications of environmental performance. For instance, if a company identifies increasing costs associated with a particular waste stream due to new local ordinances, it should reevaluate its waste management practices and potentially invest in source reduction or recycling technologies, tracking the associated environmental costs and savings. The effectiveness of this improvement cycle is measured by how well the updated system provides actionable insights that lead to reduced environmental impacts and associated financial burdens. This iterative process of review, adjustment, and integration is fundamental to leveraging environmental cost, accounting for sustained environmental and economic benefits. Question 25. An industrial facility is evaluating its environmental costs related to air emissions. While they can assign a monetary cost to the fines levied by the Regional Environmental Protection Agency for exceeding permitted sulfur dioxide /SO2 levels, they are also considering the broader impacts of /SO2 on local ecosystems and human health. According to ISO 14007-2019, what type of measurement would be most appropriate to complement the monetary cost of fines when assessing the full environmental burden of /SO2 emissions? Option A. Estimating the potential future revenue lost due to negative public perception. Option B. Calculating the cost of investing in new emission control technologies. Option C. Determining the administrative costs associated with environmental compliance reporting. Option D. Quantifying the total mass of /SO2 emitted annually in metric tons. The correct answer is D. Quantifying the total mass of /SO2 emitted annually in metric tons. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 emphasizes the importance of identifying and quantifying environmental costs. While monetary valuation is often the ultimate goal for financial reporting and decision-making, the standard acknowledges that not all environmental impacts can be easily or accurately translated into monetary terms. Non-monetary indicators serve as crucial complements, providing a more comprehensive understanding of an organization's environmental performance and the magnitude of its impacts. These indicators can include physical units, rates, or indices that reflect changes in environmental conditions or resource use. For instance, the quantity of a specific pollutant released into the atmosphere, measured in kilograms per year, or the volume of water consumed per unit of production, measured in liters per ton, are non-monetary measures. Such metrics are vital for tracking progress, setting operational targets, and communicating environmental performance to stakeholders when direct monetary conversion is complex, uncertain, or not yet feasible. They help in identifying areas for improvement and can inform the development of more robust monetary valuation methods over time. The standard advocates for a dual approach where feasible, using both monetary and non-monetary measures to build a complete picture of environmental costs. Question 26. When conducting an environmental cost audit in accordance with ISO 14007-2019, what is the overarching objective that differentiates it from a standard financial audit or a regulatory compliance check, particularly concerning the integration of environmental factors into strategic business management? Option A. To assess the market value of the organization's environmental assets and liabilities for potential mergers, acquisitions, or divestitures, focusing solely on quantifiable balance sheet items. Option B. To ensure the organization strictly adheres to all mandated environmental legal requirements and reporting obligations as stipulated by national and international environmental protection agencies. Option C. To verify the accuracy of financial statements by confirming that all operational expenses related to environmental management are correctly allocated to the appropriate cost centers within the accounting system. Option D. To systematically identify, quantify, and report all direct, indirect, contingent, and relational costs associated with an organization's environmental aspects and impacts to support strategic decision-making and performance improvement. The correct answer is D. To systematically identify, quantify, and report all direct, indirect, contingent, and relational costs associated with an organization's environmental aspects and impacts to support strategic decision-making and performance improvement. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 provides a framework for organizations to identify, quantify, and report their environmental costs. The primary purpose of determining environmental costs is to facilitate informed decision-making regarding environmental performance improvement, resource efficiency, and the integration of environmental considerations into business strategy. Environmental cost audits, as a component of this process, serve to verify the accuracy and completeness of the identified environmental costs, ensuring that all relevant expenditures and potential liabilities are captured. This includes direct costs, e.g., pollution control equipment; indirect costs, e.g., increased insurance premiums due to environmental risks; contingent costs, e.g., potential fines under regulations like the Clean Water Act or RCRA; and even relational costs, e.g., loss of customer goodwill due to environmental incidents. The scope of such an audit is to provide a comprehensive overview of the organization's environmental financial footprint, enabling the identification of cost-saving opportunities and the assessment of the financial implications of environmental risks and opportunities. It is not solely about compliance with specific environmental regulations, but rather a strategic tool for understanding the financial impact of environmental aspects and impacts. Question 27. Consider an industrial facility operating in a jurisdiction with stringent waste disposal regulations, similar to the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act (RCRA) in the United States. The facility has recently discovered historical, unrecorded disposal of hazardous materials at a remote corner of its property. Regulatory authorities have indicated that a thorough site investigation and potential soil remediation will be required. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14007-2019, how should the organization categorize and account for the anticipated costs associated with this discovery and subsequent regulatory compliance, given that the exact scope and cost of remediation are still under assessment, but a significant outflow is probable? Option A. Defer recognition of these costs until the remediation is fully completed and the final invoice is received from the contractor to ensure absolute certainty of the amount. Option B. Allocate these costs to the Environmental Management System's capital expenditure budget, treating them as an investment in future compliance rather than a current liability. Option C. Recognize these costs as an environmental provision or contingent liability, requiring estimation based on current information and disclosure in financial reporting, with ongoing reassessment as more data becomes available. Option D. Classify these costs solely as operational expenses for the current financial period, regardless of the future impact or the historical nature of the disposal. The correct answer is C. Recognize these costs as an environmental provision or contingent liability, requiring estimation based on current information and disclosure in financial reporting, with ongoing reassessment as more data becomes available. Explanation: ISO 14007, 2019 emphasizes the importance of understanding and managing environmental costs. When an organization identifies potential environmental liabilities, such as the cost of remediating a contaminated site, these costs need to be recognized and accounted for. These liabilities can arise from past activities or ongoing operations and are often dictated by national or regional environmental protection laws. For instance, regulations like the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act (CERCLA) in the United States or similar legislation elsewhere mandate that polluters are responsible for cleanup costs. The determination of these costs involves estimating expenditures for investigation, containment, remediation, monitoring, and potential legal fees. In the context of ISO 14007, these identified and estimated remediation costs are considered contingent liabilities if the probability of outflow is more than remote, and the amount can be reliably estimated, or actual liabilities if the obligation is probable and estimable. Furthermore, the standard encourages proactive identification of future environmental costs associated with planned activities or changes, which might include the cost of decommissioning a facility or managing waste from new processes. The challenge lies in accurately quantifying these future obligations, often requiring expert assessments and consideration of evolving regulatory landscapes. A framework provided by ISO 14007 guides organizations to integrate these financial implications into their environmental management system, fostering better decision-making and risk mitigation. The specific regulatory context, such as a mandatory environmental impact assessment report that identifies remediation needs, directly influences the recognition and measurement of these environmental costs. Question 28. Consider an industrial manufacturing firm, Veridian Dynamics, which has implemented a comprehensive environmental management system, EMS, in line with ISO 14001. The firm is now undertaking an environmental cost assessment as per ISO 14007-2019. During this assessment, Veridian Dynamics encounters significant difficulty in assigning the costs associated with its corporate-wide sustainability reporting department and the expenses for general employee environmental awareness training. These costs are not directly linked to a single product line or a specific pollution control equipment. Which category of environmental costs, as addressed by ISO 14007-2019, presents the most significant challenge for Veridian Dynamics in this scenario? Option A, indirect environmental costs. Option B, direct environmental costs. Option C, avoided environmental costs. Option D, contingent environmental costs. The correct answer is A, indirect environmental costs. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019, Environmental Management Guidelines for determining the environmental costs of an organization, emphasizes the identification, quantification, and reporting of environmental costs. A significant challenge in this process is the attribution of indirect environmental costs. These are costs that are not directly tied to a specific environmental impact or activity, but are incurred due to the organization's overall environmental performance or management system. Examples include the cost of environmental training for all staff, the administrative overhead for managing an environmental management system, or the cost of legal counsel for environmental compliance across multiple operations. Accurately allocating these costs to specific products, processes, or business units requires robust cost accounting methodologies and a clear understanding of the causal relationships between general environmental management efforts and specific operational outputs. Without proper allocation, the true cost of environmental impacts may be obscured, leading to suboptimal decision-making regarding pollution prevention, resource efficiency, and investment in cleaner technologies. The standard suggests various methods for allocation, but the inherent complexity and the need for subjective judgment often make this a difficult aspect of environmental cost accounting. Question 29. When an industrial facility implements a robust system of regular water discharge sampling, air emission monitoring, and detailed environmental compliance reporting, as mandated by regulations such as the Clean Water Act and the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, what category of environmental costs, as defined by ISO 14007-2019, does this proactive oversight primarily represent? Option A, prevention costs. Option B, internal failure costs. Option C, detection costs. Option D, external failure costs. The correct answer is C, detection costs. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 provides a framework for identifying, quantifying, and managing environmental costs. When an organization is determining its environmental costs, it can categorize these costs into several types. Prevention costs are expenditures incurred to prevent the occurrence of environmental pollution or damage. These proactive measures aim to avoid future environmental liabilities and remediation expenses. Examples include investing in cleaner production technologies, employee training on environmental best practices, and conducting environmental impact assessments for new projects. Detection costs are incurred to identify and measure environmental issues or noncompliance. These costs arise from monitoring environmental performance, conducting internal audits, and testing emissions. These activities help in ensuring that the organization's operations are within regulatory limits and that potential problems are identified early. Failure costs are incurred when environmental requirements are not met, leading to actual environmental damage or noncompliance. These are further divided into internal failure costs, e.g., costs of treating pollution that has already occurred but is managed internally, and external failure costs, e.g., fines, penalties, legal fees, remediation of contaminated sites, and compensation for environmental damage to third parties. Understanding these distinct categories allows an organization to develop a comprehensive environmental cost accounting system and to strategically allocate resources for environmental management. The question asks to identify the category of costs associated with ensuring compliance with regulations like the Clean Water Act or the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act through regular monitoring and reporting. Such activities are performed to detect any deviations from environmental standards before they escalate into significant problems or failures. Therefore, these costs fall under detection costs. Question 30. Following a significant, unplanned release of a chemical byproduct that temporarily exceeded local discharge permit limits, a manufacturing facility in a region governed by stringent effluent standards needs to address the root cause and prevent future occurrences. According to the principles outlined in ISO 14007-2019 for determining environmental costs, what is the most comprehensive approach to managing the associated environmental costs, encompassing both immediate response and long-term prevention? Option A. Quantify the costs of the immediate cleanup, the regulatory fines incurred, and the investment in a new filtration system, while also tracking the operational costs of the revised maintenance schedule for the filtration system. Option B. Calculate the cost of external environmental consultants to investigate the incident and the estimated cost of potential future reputational damage, without factoring in the direct expenses of corrective technologies or operational changes. Option C. Focus solely on the cost of the new filtration system as the primary corrective action, assuming this will inherently prevent future incidents and thus eliminate future costs. Option D. Document the costs of employee training on improved handling procedures and the administrative costs of updating the environmental management system documentation, disregarding the capital expenditure for equipment upgrades. The correct answer is A. Quantify the costs of the immediate cleanup, the regulatory fines incurred, and the investment in a new filtration system, while also tracking the operational costs of the revised maintenance schedule for the filtration system. Explanation: ISO 14007-2019 emphasizes identifying and managing environmental costs when a nonconformity arises related to an environmental aspect, such as an unexpected discharge exceeding permitted levels under a local environmental regulation like the Clean Water Act in the United States or the Water Framework Directive in the European Union. The organization must implement corrective actions to address the immediate issue and prevent recurrence. This involves a systematic process. First, the root cause of the nonconformity must be determined. This might involve investigating process deviations, equipment failures, or human error. Once the root cause is identified, appropriate corrective actions are designed and implemented. These actions should aim to eliminate the cause of the nonconformity. For example, if a faulty valve led to an overflow, the corrective action would be to repair or replace the valve and implement a more rigorous maintenance schedule. Crucially, ISO 14007-2019 also links this to cost management by requiring the evaluation of the costs associated with the nonconformity and the corrective actions themselves. This includes the cost of investigation, the cost of the remedial action, e.g., cleanup, repair, and potentially fines or penalties imposed by regulatory bodies. Furthermore, the standard mandates a review of the effectiveness of the corrective actions to ensure they have indeed prevented recurrence, and to identify any new environmental costs that may have arisen from the implementation of these actions. This iterative process of identification, analysis, action, and review is fundamental to improving environmental performance and managing associated costs effectively, aligning with the principles of continuous improvement embedded in environmental management systems.